Welcome to Get Serious, another pretty crazy story here. So, if you've been paying attention to the podcast the past few weeks, we have been working on this anticipated $350K purchase waterfront infill lot in Florida that seemed like it was an easy 2x conservative margin. We completed all the DD. We had broker lined up, everything checked out for this property and from this Canadian seller. And, there were some question marks associated with them, but, motivated sellers, like so many of them are loose cannons and have a lot going on with their life that not enough kind of tipped us off that there was something like really off with them. But the punchline is that this was a really sophisticated fraudster. And, we got to the day of funding, like literally right before title company was approving the final parts of the closing, all the docs were notarized, deed, etc., before they ultimately determined that the seller was not who they said they were, which is, frankly, pretty impressive to get that far into the process and was able to fool all of us along the way. Or even when we had certain red flags come along the way, like they were always able to keep moving things forward and have enough of a rationale that, we believed, in spite of some of the evidence, that things were still trending in the right direction to actually complete the sale here. So, I will just run down some of the key flags about this and how ultimately we sorted out the fraud here and the scam. And I'm going to do a full breakdown within the Serious News newsletter as well here too, and as well as how we could catch fraud attempts like this much earlier before we invest so many resources. Like ultimately, yeah, it sucks we didn't get, the deal to close, but ultimately much better compared to if our money was actually wired out in the first place here. So could be a lot worse, but we also invested tens of hours into getting the deal this far along, had everything ready to go, and for it to fall apart literally the day of funding. So I would obviously love to prevent that much work going in earlier in the process, and now I think we have some techniques to do so. To give more of a breakdown here, first, this was an international seller. You always generally have to suspect, folks that aren't U.S. citizens a bit more for possible fraud. Like there's just more ways for them to hide, potentially, especially for various offshore accounts. But, in this case, this guy picked like a really, he matched with, this single seller in Florida here, like beautiful waterfront property. It's like, too good to be true, this type of deal to find waterfront on the Gulf for this type of price. And, you can suspect that, but we're in the land industry. Like there's plenty of times we found people that are just in various levels of distress, and you're just picking up an asset that is, clearly worth a lot more than what they're selling it for. So that wasn't like enough for us to just immediately trigger. Plus, like having, again, he just chose things very carefully. Like this person that owned this property was also based in Canada, and the property's history was that somebody had picked it up, bought it at the height of the previous real estate bubble, or rather I should say COVID was, really the previous bubble now, which we're crashing out of. But pre-GFC, somebody bought this infill lot for $1.6 million and then defaulted almost immediately by like 07 or 08. So the bank acquired it, and then this seller, the person who was dealing with us, they purchased the property in like the midst of the GFC in mid 2009 for like 220 grand. So, we were picking up the property for 350, which was like, for a property that was conservatively worth 700, probably a bit more than that. Not outside the realm of possibility. And the fact that, oh yeah, he picked it up at such, a great price over 15 years ago, could be feeling more distressed now, still like earning a profit on the property. Plus, there was some like weird listing history, even over the last year. A little over 6 months ago, the property was listed for like a day, which I kind of wonder now. We never reached out to that broker, but whether that was the fraudster kind of impersonating the seller and then got taken down over a day. Plus, they had tried to list it as well like 3 years ago, but it only was like for 5 days. So, like, it lended itself to a story of like, yeah, this person is just, they're a bit of a loose cannon. Maybe they sign a listing agreement, then immediately bail. And they're like, yeah, I just want to get this thing off the market. Like, that's, I reviewed the transcripts from the phone and everything. All of it, was checking out. We were able to trace back the lead to a legitimate cell phone, like it wasn't Google Voice or via VoIP phone line, like this guy was. It was a Canadian phone line as well too. Like all of that was checking out. Plus, we had the passport photo of this seller. And the land investor who brought us this deal, like, is a very sophisticated operator. They've been around a long time. Bigger team, and they had been like, they've dealt with fraud in the past before, so they had initial fraud checks and it was passing all of these, like legit phone line. They ran it through AI image analysis for the passport and was like, okay, it seems to be coming back fine. I'm not an expert in Canadian passports, but when I saw it, it seemed okay. Just looking at it, it passes a cursory initial review. And, there were some warning signs throughout this. This guy seemed to be working on an oil rig off the coast of Denmark, which again, like, that wasn't like an immediate trigger for possible, fraud. Like, again, who knows what happened with this guy, with his life. It's just busy with other jobs and trying to let go of this property. Like, he understood the FERPTA requirements, which is like, for foreign sellers, you have to have a withholding tax on behalf of the buyer. So like he was mentioning, I've looked into this, I'm willing to sign off on it. Like, all of this was still seeming legit. One of the key warning signs was, we got to the first anticipated close date where this guy, he's just traveling often, like from Europe to Middle East to Canada. And he was like in Canada for a couple days, and you can only do remote online notaries in the US or Canada. And so he was asking, hey, can I do an RON while I'm here in Canada? And so he showed up and passed the initial, ID check. We know how, you have to answer like certain questions about, your own personal background and so forth. I didn't test out this RON, but I've never signed up for or done a remote online notary where you have to answer like, hey, did you live at this street address, or what color is your car, and something like that. So presumably those barriers were in place, and he was able to pass them. And it passed the passport screen, which is like, seems like a pretty sophisticated app, right? The whole photo check and everything like that. But he did not have a social identification number, which is basically like a social security number for Canada. And so the closing docs weren't able to be signed because he didn't have that, which, was a concern, but it wasn't something that was going to fully break down the deal for us either, because, for the sake of IDs, when we go to notarize docs and anything, for RON, you need your social to kind of confirm identity. But anytime you go to the bank or have a mobile notary, you just need your form of photo ID. And so like, the fact that this guy doesn't have it, and he also, is claiming multiple citizenship. I also did like a deeper dive into, ChatGPT around, hey, like, does everybody have an SIN in Canada? And it was like, usually most people do, but if they're working outside the country, like, it's not a firm requirement. So like, there was some gray area. So to us, it was like, okay, it's not really our business who, or how he handles kind of the taxes on the back end. That's not our problem. We just want his ID confirmed so that we can get title to the property and move on about our business. And the title company did accept this, and they still move forward, though again, everybody was kind of flagging, hey, there could be something here. And then this guy had to fly back to the Middle East, and he was going to work on another oil rig, like off the coast of Dubai or something, or not something. That is what the case was. And so he was going to be there for a few months. And so we're like, okay, the only way, since we can't do RON anymore, and you don't have this social number, you can go to the US Embassy in Dubai and get the docs physically notarized there. And again, this is a Florida property, so you need two witnesses to be brought forth into the actual embassy itself. Plus, it's pretty expensive. Like, it's $50 per notarization to do that. And this guy, he scheduled it. He understood the requirements and also realized, yeah, for that embassy notarization, you did not need a social identification number for Canada, which again, like, we were willing to accept for that. And so as we were anticipating this other closing date, we were also aligning on the FERPTA forms, again, foreign withholding tax. When a seller of land is foreign, you have to fill out a certain tax form for the IRS. And this guy didn't have a US tax ID number either, which, like, I was even less concerned about, because again, it's like only related to the taxes for the seller of the property. So if he ever wants to recoup some type of refund from the IRS, like, he's on the hook for producing a US TIN. But for us, like, again, it really doesn't matter. And in our experience, and we've done this before for like way smaller properties in the past, where we had sellers that did not have a TIN, but we still, sent in the money to the IRS, and the IRS never threw a fit about it. Especially now, the government shut down and so many workers furloughed, like, that's going to be on the bottom of their concern pile. So we took a calculated risk and was like, okay, even if the IRS slaps us with a bit of a fine because the seller did not have a tax ID, like, are they really going to complain that they're about to get 50 grand of taxes into their coffers right now? Probably not. So that was a risk we were willing to take. And again, like, the seller could apply for a TIN at any point. And, again, that's his own tax situation, like, not really our concern. So title company was willing to sign off on that as well. Again, just like being mindful, yeah, risk here too. But for us, it was like, hey, yeah, if this guy is like, his ID is being validated, notarization, etc., this still seems legit. And he still was like, to me, it was reading more of like kind of a frazzled operate. Like, it didn't seem overly scammy, I guess I would say. Like, he wasn't like really pushing, get the money in. It was almost like we were chasing him a little bit more. And we knew we had a good deal on the hands too. Like, again, the really smooth and sophisticated operator. It's 2020 hindsight. There's like a lot that added up. But you can see, like, he passed so many of these checkpoints that a lot of other scammers wouldn't be able to do. Like, just pick the perfect property, perfect name, clearly was able to bypass notarization with, fake passport. And, the day came where it was time to go to the embassy, and he succeeded. He gave us the scans back, brought witnesses to the US Embassy, passed all those notarization checkpoints, got approved. Like, I'm even looking at them right now, and yeah, they were considering his passport, fake passport. I mean, imagine, like, I almost, again, kind of like admire the cojones on this guy, like, going into the Middle East, into an embassy, and walking in with fake ID. And who knows, like, were these witnesses also in on the scam, or were they like, legitimate people and thought he was like the real guy? I would just be sweating bullets. I mean, again, can you imagine if you're getting caught for impersonating an individual, or just somebody like, the notary, like, pointing out a fraudulent passport when you're in the Middle East? Like, it's just crazy. Like, it's so bold, really, really ballsy to do that. And yet it worked. Like, he was able to sign and, sent back this scan package, got it on a DHL. The title company got the docs. We were all set to close yesterday, actually, for this, and also had a scanned copy of the ID. And he had his wire info in there. And again, it was a bit unusual because it was like 3 different bank accounts in Dubai, and he was asking for different installments there, which, like, again, would like throw off a trigger a bit. But again, my threshold for being flagged was just, or the bar to overcome was just lower. Or rather, is it a high bar or a low bar? Probably a higher bar for a threshold for fraud, because it's like, I don't know how other banks and financial institutions work in other countries. Maybe that, was necessary, or they had certain limits coming in. Like we've seen that for sending wires routinely. Like we see that in the US plenty of times where it's like you're capped at 30, 50K, whatever, sending out wires. So maybe on the recipient side too, like there could be limitless. So it was like unusual, but it wasn't, something that was just glaringly obvious. And even same for the title company. They're like, yeah, this is not typical, but could be. And again, it was like a notarized doc. Like they, approved these bank accounts with his name on it. And then, so the day of closing, like really the only last things we had to do was just the title company wanted to confirm wire info with the seller and got him on the line and everything. And I guess this is where it all fell apart. And he tried to provide a US domestic account that he claimed was a joint account, but it had somebody else's name on it. So that like really triggered the title company. Like, hey, this does not seem legit. And they flagged it more for us. Like, hey, this might not be something we can insure now. Like there's been multiple flags. This is kind of like the last straw. And, the seller came back and he's like, hey, no, it's a joint account. My name is on there. Otherwise, again, you can use the Dubai accounts, but, it's just the installments. It's going to be less convenient. So like, again, unusual, but still plausible with that. And we had come so far. And again, he passed all this notarization. Like I was still, hey, like, can you just check these Dubai accounts, even if it's inconvenient, just charge them more wire fees, whatever, to do it. But then the title company, as they were trying to validate that, they came back and just gave a notice like, hey, we cannot insure this transaction. And normally they can't share anything when they, make a decision like that, because then, they have some liability for what was their decision making. But because we got so far, I got their, main escrow or VP on the line. I'm like, dude, you can just give me something here on why this fell apart. And he wasn't able to share everything about it. He's like, we are very, very confident that this is not the true seller of this property. Like there's multiple flags along the way. And now like, yeah, we checked all these bank accounts. He is not on these domestic ones. The Dubai ones do not check out either. And like, I was asking for something and he was like, even look at the scan package, what he sent back, the IDs, like take a look at those. And again, like I had it in front of my face, and sometimes it's like, those picture books where you have to stare at the image a certain way or what are some of those other images where you can sometimes like see the face of the woman or like a vase sometimes, but until that moment is that you can switch your brain over, like you might just miss it. So I was looking at these IDs, and again, like they just look legit. Like it's passing my threshold. I'm like, can you just tell me some more details about what the problem is? And he's like, yeah, I really can't share. This is already more than I should be sharing. But he's like, hey, just really pay attention to the IDs here. And then like we wrapped up the call, and so I took the IDs and threw in like a really sophisticated AI prompt to do anti-fraud, and kind of use like Callan's techniques for just a lot of context, like, hey, I really need you to point out all the key things wrong with these IDs. And again, like credit to AI here, like it pointed out like 10 different factors, subtle, but why those IDs were fraudulent. And a number of things, I won't go over all of them, but like the most glaringly obvious one, which again, like just on a cursory review, looking at it, just, misses the first time looking at this. And like no one on our team caught it. No one at the title company, like initially, caught it, or, even any of us that were looking at these documents, was that the picture or the profile picture of the seller in his driver's license was the same as in his passport, which is like, oh yeah, that never happened. So, but again, something that if you're not looking for that, it's just something that you're kind of missing. But then it's like, oh my gosh, that is so glaringly obvious. And then there were, like there was like a prefix on the Canadian passport that had been discontinued a few years ago, before like his issuance came. So like, subtle stuff that if you're not like an expert in passport ID review, and why he could pass, like, again, he passed US Embassy notarization review or remote online notary like it was not a terrible job of fraud here, or a few of these like signature overlays were off by like 5 to 7 millimeters, like according to the AI. So like really subtle stuff that it helped to be able to point out once we took it through. And so now it's like, all right, to prevent this from ever happening again, like really sophisticated fraudster, like again, getting literally to the day of closing, able to pass all of these checkpoints. Like really, really solid job by him to get that far. But how to prevent that is like, yeah, now we're going to require seller ID here and at least put it through like an anti-fraud sophisticated ChatGPT prompt for like an initial AI analysis. And while that won't be the end all be all, it should, like, it would have been able to catch this guy if we had reviewed. And we only had his passport to start. We didn't have the driver's license to compare. But even with the passport, we should have been able to catch on some of this stuff earlier on. That would have prevented all of this rigmarole and effort if we had done that in the first place. So now that is our lesson here to prevent this from happening again. Ultimately, yeah, we rely on the title company to assist with this because, ultimately they're the ones who would be liable, if there is a title issue. So like, even if we acquired the property, we would have title. And even if we sold it, we could, like, it's reliant on the true seller to then make a claim that, hey, there's title fraud going on. And then that whole title chain will have to be unwound, which is whole nasty business. So like, we would have to give back profits that we might have got from the deal. We'd have to get funds back from the title company itself. So like, it would have still been a big mess, but like, we wouldn't have been, directly liable for that issue. So like, again, if we were trying to do something like this outside of working with a title company, yeah, I mean, buyer beware to do something like that. But, that's why while we're on the lookout for fraud, like, title companies, like, that is their primary job to sort out because they're ultimately the ones that are going to be on the hook to sort that. So Florida, biggest state in the country for fraud as well too. Just being mindful of that. Like, yeah, just be careful out there because these guys are good. Under 50K that we nearly wired out for a situation like that. And so hopefully some of these warning signs will be helpful for you all, at least an entertaining story for you. And looking forward to actually working on a legit transaction. We still closed one earlier this week, and now we have more cash to work with, so send more stuff over. With that, seriousland.capital for your funding needs, Land Daily Diligence Facebook group, and landpricer.ai, most reliable land pricing tool in the market. Subscribe and share, everybody. Take care. Talk to you next time. Bye.